welcome back. We're going to continue to read the novel Lord of the Mysteries by Cuttlefish That Loves Diving, Volume 1, The Clown. Last time we read up to chapters 81, I think. Yeah. So let's continue with chapter 82 today. Chapter 82, Herb Store. Various colors surfaced as auras and various colors surfaced as auras entered client's eyes. He casually studied Sir Dewey's condition. He's very healthy. There are almost no hidden problems. His emotional state is horrendous. Amid amidst the dullness, there's frailty. His mental state is frail. He has trouble sleeping well, but the purple aura at his head is completely fine. Client muttered silently to himself as Sir Dewey walked off and left the library. Retracting his gaze, Client pinched his forehead and sighed silent inwardly. Being a tycoon sure isn't easy. He didn't pay much attention to the matter and returned his gaze onto the journal issues in front of him. Client did not find a lot of clues after reading each of them. He could only confirm a few things. Firstly, there existed an ancient kingdom on the Hornasus mountain range as well as its surroundings. The ancient kingdom's history dated back at least 1500 years. Secondly, their architectural style was primarily about being grand. They left behind all sorts of murals, and from those murals, it could be deducted that they believed that the Evernight would protect the loved ones of the departed. Finally, in the ruins, there were symbols that represented the Evernight everywhere, but they were clearly different from Evernight's sacred emblem. If I had a chance, no, even if I had a chance, I'll never go there, Clan muttered with clenched teeth. He vowed not to quote them. After tidying the journal articles and returning them back to their original spots, he put on his hat, lifted his cane, and left the Deweyville Library. Divination Club. Bogda looked at the beautiful lady in charge of receiving guests and said, I'd like to have a divination. Angelica smiled politely and said, Do you have a preferred fortune teller? Or would you like to flip through our would you like to flip through our introduction guide and choose the one that's most suitable for you? Bogda pressed the right side of his abdomen and gasped silently for a breath while saying, I wish to have Mr. Klein Moretti divine for me. But Mr. Moretti is not here today, Angelica answered with uncertainty. Bogda fell silent for a moment as he paced a few steps and asked, When will Mr. Moretti be available? No one knows. He has his own matters to deal with. From what I have seen, he usually comes here on Monday afternoons, Angelica said as she pondered over the matter. All right. Bogda's face darkened as he turned around, planning to leave. Sir, you can choose other fortune tellers as well. For example, you can choose Mr. Hanas Vincent, who is famous in Tingan City. Angelica tried her best to prevent the loss of business. Bogda stopped in his tracks and considered for a moment before saying, No, I only trust Mr. Moretti. Well, can I wait here for a moment? Perhaps he might come after he's done with his matters? No problem, Angelica said with a warm smile. Bogda went to the sofa and sat down. Sometimes he stroked his cane, at other times he looked out the window, clearly looking rather impatient. Seconds turned to minutes, just as Bogda's mind was in a mess, unsure if he should continue waiting or leave. He heard the beautiful lady exclaim in pleasant surprise, Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti. Client saw the familiar Angelica and was just about to ask why it was always her. She did not need to rest or take her days off. However, he immediately took into consideration that he was a seer, so it was not appropriate for him to ask such questions. Instead, he has to use the tone of a charlatan and say something like, How marvelous it is for fate to compel us to meet once again, Madam Angelica. Would this sound like I'm hitting on her? Client's mind whirled as he finally replied with a smile. Good afternoon, Madam Angelica. A customer wishes to hire you for a divination. Angelica pointed at Bogda, who had hurriedly stood up from the sofa. Someone actually requested for me? Klein took off his half-top hat in pleasant surprise, pinching his glabella twice while doing so. Good afternoon, sir. He looked over when his voice suddenly came to a pause. In his spirit vision, he saw the requester's sliver looking dim. It was nearly black in color. It was making the rest of his body unbalanced as his aura was thin in various places. Klein deliberated over his words and said in a serious expression, Sir, you should see a doctor and not seek a divination. Bogda stood stunned on spot as he immediately gave a pleasant look of surprise while muttering, How fascinating. Anna wasn't lying to Anna wasn't lying to me. He hurriedly looked up with uh, he hurriedly looked up at Klein in earnest. Mr. Moretti, I've already seen a doctor and might have to undergo surgery. However, I am frightened about the surgery. I would like to divine the outcome. The surgery of this era was really fraught with danger. Although Emperor Roselle had given the impetus, this era still lacked most of the necessary technology. Client didn't reject his request and nodded slightly. My divination fee is 8 pence. Is that fine? 8 pence? Bogda exclaimed in surprise. You're only charging 8 pence? According to Anna's description and performance Mr. Moretti had shown me, I'm willing to pay at least a pound. Haven't you heard of small margins with large volume? Client was embarrassed for a moment. After thinking of her a few seconds, he calmly smiled and replied, It's enough just being blessed with the ability to receive revelations from the divine and catch a glimpse of fate. Therefore, we must maintain our humility and suppress our greed. Only by doing so can we continue being bestowed with our gifts. You are a true seer. Bogda held his chest and bowed, his tone filled with sincerity. Upon receiving Bogda's praise and trust, client's spirituality seems to relaxed. As for the description of his principles, it also gave him some new insight. Miss Angelica, is topaz available? Available? He turned to the beautiful lady beside him. Angelica heaved a sigh of relief for Bogda as she smiled sweetly. Yes. After entering the divination room, Klein instructed Bogda to lock the door. Then he sat behind the table and pinched his forehead. Shall we use tarot cards for divination? He inquired with a smile. Spirit dowsing was only suitable to determine matters related to him. As for drawing an astrolabe, it was too time consuming. I'll leave it up to you. Bogda had no objections. Therefore, Klein helped him shuffle and cut the deck before laying them out in an intis formation. Thanks to his Thanks to his uniqueness as a seer, Klein did not flip the other cards. Instead, he directly flipped the card that indicated the final result. A reversed wheel of fortune. Things will develop badly, he said solemnly as he shot a glance. Color of Bogda's face drained instantly and his lips trembled. Is it hopeless? As Klein tried his best to think of a solution, he said, Let me try a different divination methods. Please leave your ring behind. Next, write your date of birth on this piece of paper, then please wait outside quietly. Influenced by his gentle and comforting tone, Bogda calmed down and followed the instruction by writing down the information and leaving his ring behind. As he watched Bogda leave, Klein wrote a sentence on the piece of paper. Outcome of Bogda Jones's surgery. He picked up the ring and the paper slip, leaned back into his seat before using dream divination technique. In a blurry, distorted world, he gradually found himself, only to see the gentleman collapse with an ashen expression. He was covered in white cloth as he pushed out of the quaking operating room. This time, Klein didn't encounter anything strange. He no longer felt a sense of being watched, so he quickly woke up. He knitted his brows tightly as he considered how he was going to inform Bogda about the outcome. The surgery may very well lead to death. I can only try restorative ritualistic magic I learned today, but that would expose the matter of beyond us. Besides I have to apply for captain's approval first. Yeah, I might not be able to treat such a severe disease. Klein was racking his brains when he suddenly thought of something. Mr. Glace's lung disease was treated by an apothecary. He said that the medicine was extremely miraculous. What was it? Right. Lawson Drawwade, Darkwade, 18 Lath Street in East Borough. Lawson's Folk Herb Store. As he tried best to memorize the address back then, Klein quickly remembered the details. He rapped on the corners of his desk and quickly made a decision. After using spirit dowsing to quickly determine if it was a good or bad idea, Klein walked out the door. When he saw Bogda stand up in a fluster, he returned his ring to him and said warmly, with a smile, I found hope for you. Really? Bogda asked, pleasantly surprised. Klein did not reply as he continued talking. Your hope lies in East Borough on Black Streets. It's related to a single term, Lawson. If you can't find it, come back here again on Monday at 4 in the afternoon. Good, good. Bogdan nodded as he repeated himself. He excitedly fished out his wallet and produced 5 pence and 3 pennies. He had done according to what Klein said and without using tips to corrupt a croupier. Corners of Klein's lips twitched as he received the money, but he smiled brilliantly. I hope you'll find hope as soon as possible. After Bogda left, he handed over the commission like the previous time and also gave Angelica tips, pretending he had collected a soli. Eastborough, Vlad Street. Bogda walked from one end of the street to other, repeating it 3 times until his liver started to ache. Finally, he determined that there was only one place that had anything to do with Lawson on the street. It was Lawson's Folk Herb Store, number 18 on the street. Mustering his courage, he walked in and caught the smell of various herbs. He saw that the owner of the shop had black but very short hair. His face was round and he looked to be in his 30s or 40s. The boss's formal attire resembled that of a village witch doctor. It was deep black robe embroidered with all kinds of strange symbols. Hello, do you have a medicine that can treat my disease? Bogda asked politely. The boss raised his head and swept his deep blue eyes across Bogda and smiled. Your liver disease is very serious, but the premise of everything is whether you have the money. Do you have enough to pay for the medicine? You can tell. Bogda suddenly felt a lot more confident as he nodded frantically. How much is your medicine? £10. It's a very fair price. The boss fished out a bag of herbs from under the counter and said, add sufficient water and boil it into the medicine. After boiling it, add 10 drops of fresh rooster blood. Oh, then drink it out immediately. This bag of herbs can be cooked thrice. You'll be fine after 3 times. As he spoke, he opened the yellowish brown paper and threw in all sorts of strange herbs. It sounds extremely shady. Yeah. Bogda gulped down his saliva and said, that's it. The boss stared at him and immediately smiled. Do you still want something else? What about this bag? Once you recover from your liver disease, I can give you a guarantee that your wife will be very satisfied. He chuckled as he took out a black papered bag of herbs and suppressed his voice. There's mummy powder inside? Oh, trust me, lot of aristocrats consume this stuff. They put it in their tea and boil it as a soup. Oh, Magda's confidence at the boss wavered to the point of feeling disgusted. I believe in Mr. Moretti. He took a deep breath, fished out his wallet, and pulled out two biggest notes from the what little was left of his gold pounds. Chapter 83, Carving. Holding onto the yellowish brown paper bag full of herbs, Bogda staggered out of Lawson's folk herb store. While waiting for a tracked carriage, he suddenly came to a realization. He had spent £10 to buy a bag of stuff. This was nearly a month's salary for him. If it wasn't for his trust in Anna and Joyce, he wouldn't have brought that much cash to the divination club. Could it be that the reason why Mr. Moretti only accepted 8 pence for his divination had something to do with his collusion from the boss of Lawson for Herb Store, so as to earn more? This was a classic scam written on the papers. When Bogda made this connection, he even began to suspect Lion a little. He even began suspecting Joyce and Anna. When a tracked carriage stopped in front of him, he looked at the herbs in his hand. Unable to bring himself to return, he entered the carriage with a heavy heart. Inside Lawson's folk herb store, as the boss watched Bokta leave, he suddenly turned his head and shouted at the door where there was a pile of herbs. Carmaine, Carmaine, stop purchasing herbs from today. Why, master? A handsome looking youth with disheveled hair walked out. The boss smiled. This is the 16th customer that has come because of my fame. If this carries on, I believe the nighthawks, the machinery hive mind, and the mandated punishers will notice me. When the time comes, I'll need to consider heading to other cities. Then do we need to sublease this store? Carmaine nodded in understanding as he asked with concern. The boss chuckled. If you wish to stay, you can be the boss of the store. You are already capable of identifying herbs and concocting medicine. Of course, remember to deposit half your monthly profits into my anonymous Backland bank account. But I haven't learned what you are really good at. Scarmain was already sick of never staying in the city for more than a year, but he was unwilling to give up learning the magical formulas that his master was good at. The boss leisurely rocked back himself in the seat. That's not something you can learn just because you want to. A blackish green bubbling liquid appeared in front of Bogda's eyes. It smelt of stinking socks, and the colors that make one want to puke made him deeply suspicious about everything he had done today. When the rooster blood was dropped into the medicine, Bogda's father looked at his son worriedly and said, I think surgery is the best option. A few drops of blood bubbled with the boiling liquid before vanishing. Bogda took a deep breath and said, if this medicine is useless, I'll consider surgery. The Lord will watch over you. Bogda's father gestured a triangular secret emblem across his chest. By the time boiling liquid had cooled down, Bogda had no intention of wasting the 10 pounds. He raised his right hand and closed his eyes. Flicking his head back, he gulped down the medicine in one go. The pungent aroma that the noxious smell of blood swished around in his mouth as he nearly spat out everything he had just drank. That night, Bogda had an upset stomach. He went to the bathroom 6 times, and by the time the crimson moon vanished, he fell asleep groggily. Af- After an unknown period of time had passed, he jolted awake, having dreamed that he was being reprimanded by his boss at work. Thankfully, I took 3 days of annual leave, and I don't have to rush to work. Bogda heaved a sigh of relief when he discovered he felt a lot more spirited. This was in stark contrast to the sluggish state he was in for the past few weeks. Bogda subconsciously reached out and pressed the right side of his abdomen. He noticed that the region which previously hurt when under slight pressure felt normal. He only felt the pain from ordinary pressure. Don't tell me it was really effective. That apothecary was really clearly just fooling me. Bogda was both surprised and doubtful as he got out of bed. He stretched himself and felt his health returning to him. He fell silent for a long while muttering, according to the apothecary, I still need to drink it twice. Once I am done drinking, I'll go to the hospital to get a checkup from a doctor. That apothecary didn't tell me how many times I can drink a day. I still think he's a cheat. Inside the civilian staff office of the Parkland Security Company, from his prior request, client received a space where no one would disturb him. He held a carving knife and emitted his spirituality. He seriously carved the incantation and symbols onto two silver accessories. The incantation was a request to avoid misfortune and was written in Hermes. The two mysticism symbols symbolize the Evanite goddess as well as the empress of misfortune and horror. Aside from that, Klein also added the path number that corresponded to the goddess, 7, and the magical characteristic. In addition to that, charms and amulets had to be engraved on both sides. Each side's symbols, incantations, and characteristics, their exact locations or special formats, was in the realm of mysticism. The ones that were spread amongst the ordinary populace were filled with mistakes. At that moment, client had a lot of damaged materials to his right. Through repeated practice, and only after he confirmed that he had enough practice, did he dare to begin creating the amulets for Benson and Melissa. As he calmed his mind, his spirituality spewed out from the tip of the carving knife. Number 7 appeared on the surface of the silver accessories. He had already finished carving the incantations and symbols on the other side of the accessory. All that was left was to finish the remaining side. After putting down his knife, all his spirituality chained together as Klein suddenly felt a strange, majestic, and terrifying energy surge throughout the room. The commotion quickly vanished as the incantations on both sides of the accessory became complete with Klein's spirit vision. It emitted a serene blackness. He put down his carving knife and gently polished the silver accessory that was formed from a circle and a vertical piece. He felt a tinge of coolness from the mild to touch surface. It's done. He happily placed the fish, finished amulet and another one that he had previously finished into his pockets. He planning to find an opportunity to give it to Benson and Melissa. Amulets created by Beyonders possess a certain level of effectiveness. They allowed the wearer to unknowingly avoid disasters to a certain extent, but it was nothing too ridiculous. Furthermore, their spirituality would wane bit by bit, unless one used a high level ritualistic magic and created a prayer set. A year was the maximum one could use them. As for the high level ritualistic magic, there was a terrifyingly high spirituality requirement. It wasn't something client could endure at the moment. When the time comes, I can use my spirituality to make another one. Client thought, nodding as he began tidying up his messy table. He didn't make one for himself for the moment, because an amulet of that level had limited effects on him. Therefore, his goal was to gain a deeper understanding of incantations before trying to pair it with ritualistic magic. That he was that way he could create a few defensive amulets that could be activated specifically with sound. After everything was finished, Klein walked out of the office and prepared to hand over the damaged materials. That was when he saw Captain Dunn walk over with his in his black trench coat. Dunn's deep and grey eyes swept across him as he smiled. Clan, the Holy Cathedral has approved it. You're now an official member. Really? That's great. Clan expressed his delight. Dunn nodded and said with a smile, you can now receive a makeup pay of £3 for this week. You'll receive 4.50 pounds every subsequent week until the advance payment is cleared. By the way, did I mention the Nighthawk's ritual? Every official Nighthawk has to independently complete a mission. Only by doing so will you gain the recognition of your partners. In consideration of the outstanding performance you showed, I believe I can assign you an ordinary mission instead. When that of, when that happens, I'll formally introduce you to all Nighthawks in Tingan City. Klein replied without hesitation, all right, £3 plus his compensation of £7. Getting a new suit wasn't a problem anymore. Furthermore, he will still have plenty left over. Well, who knows when my mission will arrive? Klein waited all the way until Sunday, the day of Selina's birthday banquet. Changing into his formal suit and using a brush and a handkerchief to tidy his half-top hat, Klein looked himself in the mirror before walking over to the first floor in satisfaction. At that moment, Melissa was sizing up Benson's clothes. Is there a problem? Benson raised his cane, feeling a little lacking due to his sister's gaze. He felt that there was nothing wrong with him when he inspected himself. He was already dressed quite decently. Melissa stopped staring at him and said with a serious expression, Benson, that's a very old suit you're wearing. There will be a lot of excellent ladies and madams participating in today's birthday banquet. I believe that by wearing that, it will be a form of disrespect to them. Klein was originally filled with questions. However, when he heard Melissa's emphasis, he immediately realized what was happening. He went over with a chuckle and said, Benson and I share a similar build. He can wear my other tuxedo. He had already informed his siblings about buying a new suit. He explained it away by saying that his clothes had been torn while inspecting certain objects. Therefore, the company generally compensated him. Of course, he concealed the matter of him being promoted with a pay rise. He was afraid of scaring them and only planned to tell them after half a year. Such an explanation made Benson and Melissa extremely envious. They felt that the Blackthorn Security Company was an impeccable employer. There's no need to, right? Benson retorted, having not realized the gravity of the situation. No, it's extremely important. Client pushed Benson's shoulder up the stairs. My tuxedo is hanging on the clothes rack. After watching Benson go up the stairs in a daze, Client turned around and smiled at Melissa. Are you hoping that Benson will use the opportunity provided by Selena's birthday banquet to begin a beautiful new romance? He had been reading quite a fair amount of newspapers and magazines recently. He knew that aristocrats and middle class banquets were typically grounds for blind dates. Melissa nodded solemnly. Yes, Benson has missed out too much because of us. Sis, why are you like a mother? Klein looked at Melissa as he suddenly shook his head with an exasperated laugh. Chapter 84. Elizabeth. Seeing the unconvinced look, seeing the unconvinced look on his sister's face, Klein suddenly felt like it was a good opportunity. He sized her up and said in a solemn expression, Melissa, I think you aren't showing enough respect to today's banquet as well. What? Melissa wore a puzzled look. Klein pointed at her neck. As a lady, you're lacking a necklace that accentuates that area. Without waiting for his sister to say another word, he smiled as he fished out a silver amulet wrapped with angel wings from his pocket. Thankfully, I prepared one for you. Melissa was taken aback first before she asked, How much was it? Sis, your concerns are really quite misplaced. Klein silently scoffed as he explained with a chuckle. It's actually not very expensive. Since it was in an incomplete state, I imitated an item that I've seen before and engraved blessing incantations and beautiful patterns on them. You engraved them? Melissa was indeed distracted. How is it? What do you think of my work? Client took the opportunity to hand over the amulet to his sister. Melissa studied it before gently biting down on her lip. I like the surrounding angel feathers. If you think the incantations and symbols that I engraved are ugly, then just say so. There's no need to mince your words. An amulet's value is in its effects. The corners of Client's mouth twitched. Just as he was about to urge his sisters to accept it, he saw Melissa put on the necklace with forced expression on her face. She then carefully adjusted the positioning of the amulet. Perfect. Client sized her up and gave her exaggerated praise. Melissa shot him a glance and looked down at her amulet. She said listlessly, Clan, you were never like that before, acting like that. Perhaps it was because of my good job. With decent income, I have become more confident. Clan interrupted his sister and gave a preemptive explanation. Even though I have received Clan's memory fragments, making myself appear natural is the most major aspects, certain fine details are still there. I'm still used to presenting my real personality, especially when I'm getting closer and more familiar with Benson and Melissa. He sighed inwardly. Melissa seems to accept his explanation and pouted her lips. It's great that you're like that. Really great. After the two engaged in a short conversation, Benson came down having changed his clothes. He wore a white shirt with a black vested tuxedo. His black bow tie and a pair of long trousers made it seem like he had undergone a complete makeover. It was like he was a successful businessman after years of hard work. Same for the receding hairline. Klein chuckled inwardly. Excellent, Benson. It suits you very well, he said with a brilliant smile while throwing up his hands. Melissa also nodded in agreement on the sidelines. The fact shows that my clothing is more important than me, Benson gave a self derisive comment. Klein took the opportunity to fish out remaining omelette and repeated his explanation from earlier before saying, I also made one for you. Not bad, I'll bring it with me. Benson accepted it without a fuss as he quipped, Klein, I wouldn't find it odd even if you were to suddenly know how to style your hair, make clothes, fix watches, and feed curly head baboons. Life is just full of surprises, Klein replied with a smile. Following that, the siblings tidied themselves up before walking out of the main room. They took the trackless public carriage, arrived at the Northborough Pena Street, where Selina's house was. The Wood family lived in a terrace house as well, but unlike Clan's place, they had a porch. They had a small lawn in the front which made it look very elegant. When they rung the doorbell, Clan, Benson, and Melissa only had to wait around 10 seconds before they were able to see the star of the day, Selina Wood. With a head covered in wine red hair, the girl gave Melissa a delighted hug. I like this dress of yours. It makes you look exceptionally beautiful. Standing beside Selina Wood was her father, Mr. Wood, senior employee of Backland Bank, Stington Branch. Welcome, our honorable elder brother. Welcome, our young historian. He deliberately addressed Benson and Klein in an exaggerated manner. Young historian, why doesn't he add the description of me having a conscience? Klein retorted as he took off his hat and replied with a smile. Mr. Wood, you look much more spirited and younger than I imagined. His style of flattery had unknowingly inclined himself to the foodaholic empire. Benson held out his hand and shook Mr. Wood's hand. I know a lot of bank employees, but they are all equally arrogant and stiff, as though they are the latest machines. None of them are as civilized as you. If you were to meet me at the bank, you might not say that about me. Wood laughed cheerfully. After exchanging pleasantries, Selina, who was wearing a new dress, led the siblings inside with a hop in her step. At times, she would mention in her usual tone that Elizabeth is already here, and other times she would suppress her voice, saying, Melissa, your brothers are more handsome than I imagined. Hey, I have a good hearing. Although you are flattering me, Klein helplessly looked at the two 16-year-old girls walking ahead of him. This isn't right. I'm still quite far from being considered handsome. Miss Selina, how ugly did you imagine Benson and I to be? A balding, gloomy, fat man with pale expression and lifeless eyes? Clan pitched his glabella in passing as he diligently practiced his spirit vision. Miss Selina Wood is healthy. She's excited and very happy. Mr. Wood's lungs are a little problematic. Right, I see his pipe. Klein swept his gaze across a crowd, while in a good mood. Elizabeth, Melissa is here. At that moment, Selina introduced with a brisk tone. The girl dressed in a blue frilly dress walked over. She had naturally curled brown hair and adorable baby fat. Klein was stunned when he saw her because he knew the girl. He had helped her choose an amulet back at the underground market. Elizabeth greeted Melissa first before looking at Benson and Klein. She was stunned and her brows knitted slightly as though she was thinking about something. Soon Elizabeth smiled and politely greeted them as though nothing had happened. Klein also pretended not to recognize her. Under Wood's lead, they came to a sofa in the living room where they were introduced to Chris, Selina Wood's brother, and the other guests. As Klein watched Benson chat with Chris and the other solicitors happily over the topic of their neighbor, Mr. Short, he couldn't help but feel envious. I don't have such socializing skills. He picked up a cocktail from a table in the corner of the room as he listened quietly. At times he would nod and echo with a smile. It didn't take long before all the guests arrived and the banquet officially began. As too many guests had been invited, the Woods family's dining table could not accommodate everyone. Therefore, the banquet was done in a buffet manner. The lady's maid served the steak dishes, roast chicken, fried fish, mashed potatoes, etc., and placed them on different tables. The valet was responsible for carving the meat, allowing for the guests to take what they wanted. Clan couldn't help but click his tongue when he saw the elegant enamel plates and silver cutlery. He felt that the Woods were being too extravagant as a middle class family. Since they are so rich, why would Chris need so many years to prepare for his wedding? As he thought of what his sister had previously mentioned, he was puzzled. Yeah, it was probably to save money to buy this cutlery that would have taken them so many years to afford. To such families, they have to look respectable. Amidst his mixed emotion, Clark picked up a plate and walked in front of the dining room. He forked a piece of honey glazed roasted meat. At that moment, Elizabeth, with her adorable baby fat cheeks, came over. As she looked at the food, she whispered, "So you're Melissa's brother?" Thank, thank you. Selena likes the amulet I gave her a lot. She said she felt healthier the moment she wore it. Selena? Amulet? Clan suddenly recalled the reason for selecting the amulet for a girl. It was to give a friend who liked mysticism as a birthday gift. That friend was Selena. Selena liked items related to mysticism. Clan frowned slightly as he smiled politely. It might just be akin to a placebo effect. After saying that, he began waiting for her to praise Emperor Roselle. However, Elizabeth's reaction was that of a confusion. What's a placebo effect? It means it's completely psychological. At times, we believe that we will turn for better and end up really becoming better. Klein explained crudely. No, she said it's different from the amulet she brought in the past. It feels different, Elizabeth emphasized. She cocked her head and shot a glance at Klein and said curiously, I never expected Melissa's brother to be an expert at mysticism. As you know, I studied history, so it's common to encounter similar matters. Klein diverted the topic skillfully as he asked, Are you also studying at Tingen's technical school? No, Selena and I were Melissa's former schoolmates. Later, she went to the technical school. I study at the nearby Evos public school, Elizabeth explained seriously. The public school wasn't established and maintained by the government. Instead, it was a school that accepted students from public. It was an evolution of good grammar schools whose goal was to groom graduates so as to enter university. Schools were rather expensive and they would consider the student's family background. It would even be out of range for middle class families. She didn't talk much. After choosing her food, she returned to Selena's side. After congratulating the star of the day on a happy birthday, the banquet gradually came to an end. Clan and Benson were invited to a game of Texas Hold'em. A small blind was half a penny and big blind was a penny. As for Melissa, Elizabeth, Selena, and their friends, they went upstairs. It was unknown if they were chatting or playing games. Clan's luck was pretty bad. He played about 20 rounds but didn't receive a good hand at all. All he could do was fold and be a spectator. When he flipped the ends of his cards again, he found a two of hearts and five of spades. Shall I try a bluff once? Clan considered for a moment but did not muster up the courage. He also resisted the urge to use divination to cheat. He covered his cards and rapped the table indicating that he was not making a call. Then he got up and left the table to head for the bathroom. Roselle was also a person with obsessive compulsive disorder. He actually found an odd reason to name the play Texas, a play style Texas. He shook his head as he proceeded forward. At that moment, he suddenly came to a halt as his pupils constricted. His spiritual perception told him that was a strange fluctuation upstairs. Okay, we have to stop here for today. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Bye bye.